Hi everyone and welcome to Bonnie Astrology. Today I'm going to be discussing Mercury retrograde in Sagittarius, which is happening from the 25th of November to the 15th of December, and of course what it means for your zodiac sign. As always, if you do enjoy this video, don't forget to give it a thumbs up to let me know that you like it. You can subscribe to the channel if you wish for more astrology content from me, and if you want to book a reading, the information listed in the description is the only place that you can get me. So let's look at this Mercury in Sagittarius cycle. So Mercury is going to be in the sign of Sagittarius from early November to early January. Mercury is spending a prolonged amount of time in Sagittarius because of this retrograde cycle. Now Mercury is the planet of communication, the way that we think, the way that we talk, the way that we listen. And this means that wherever the Sagittarius part of our chart is, it's up for a bit of review in the way that we think and the way that we communicate. And we could be feeling a little bit more reflective about how we do these things. Now, Sagittarius as a sign is representative of foreign affairs, foreign country, foreign travel, but also politics, our belief systems, whether that be politically, religiously, spiritually, any of the above, what we believe in and how we want to advocate for that, how we want to talk about that with Mercury being in Sagittarius. Now, because of the retrograde cycle, this means that these are areas that can be up for argument. Oftentimes with Mercury, it's harder to communicate and it's harder to get our viewpoint across when it's retrograde. And in the Sagittarius sign, it can often be quite blunt and quite direct, but nevertheless truthful. Sagittarius is a very honest and direct sign by association. Now, Mercury is retrograde from the 25th of November to the 15th of December. And that in the States coincides with Thanksgiving and the beginning of the holiday period. So a lot of people might be traveling under this time period. With Mercury retrograde, that does, of course, particularly in Sagittarius, suggest potentially delays for getting your passport, showing up to the airport with your passport. Without your passport, having to renew passports, having to renew visas, getting to the airport without your documentation, perhaps your flight is delayed, perhaps your flight is cancelled. These things can come up with Mercury retrograde in Sagittarius. There can be trouble with the airlines, there can be trouble with the transport system. So it can be a time where delays are more commonplace. That's typical of a Mercury retrograde cycle. It can also be a time where we have more communication issues, particularly when it comes to things such as politics and religion and spiritual topics or beliefs. These can be areas that get a little bit heated under this particular retrograde cycle. As I say, people are maybe being a bit more honest, a bit more direct, and a bit more blunt. And this can perhaps hurt feelings, particularly with this Mercury retrograde, as it is in a square to Saturn and in opposition to Jupiter. But I'll get with that in just a second. With Sagittarius energy, a lot of the time with Mercury here, people that have it, or the energy in general, likes to see the bigger picture and sometimes misses the details. That is why Mercury is not so comfortable in Sagittarius, because it wants to see the higher vision, the higher purpose, the higher meaning of it all, and sometimes misses the details. It's a great philosophical placement, but it can mean that we are perhaps missing the details and the facts of everyday reality. So that can be something such as being on your soapbox that time is a social construct, but at the same time that's not a valid excuse when you've missed your dentist appointment for the third time in a row. This can be a Mercury retrograde where you're more interested in the philosophy and what does it mean, but you find you've left the oven on, or you've left your keys in the door. It's that type of energy where it's more focused on the philosophical, the higher meaning, the higher vision, and missing the key details of the matter. So with this particular Mercury retrograde in Sagittarius, you may find that you're pondering what it all means and missing an important appointment here or there with Mercury retrograde in Sagittarius. So don't forget to come back down to see the details from time to time so that you don't, miss important appointments or miss the important detail in a contract. Mercury retrograde is not the best time to sign a contract, because oftentimes what is initiated or agreed under a Mercury retrograde, there are key details that are missed or have to be reviewed later. So while it's not necessarily that you're doomed, it just means that the process may be up for review and discussion a little bit later as well. So there can be a better way to approach this is to pause, is to delay making solid arrangements or solid agreements. If you're traveling, it is more favorable to travel to somewhere that you have been before with a Mercury retrograde, and also to be more flexible when it comes to delays. So whether that is that you get travel insurance, whether that is that you bring a really good book to the airport, making sure that you have everything that you need, phone chargers, for example, if you're going to the airport, these types of things are just more, it's better to consider them. It's not a time to put off taking that trip forever. It's not a time to put off going on holiday. It's not a time to say, no, I'm actually not going to go see my family for Thanksgiving, whatever the case may be. It's simply a time to be more flexible when it comes to having to make adjustments here and there and rearrangements here and there. And when seeing things from a higher perspective with Mercury and Sagittarius, you may find if your flight is delayed, you may actually be considering, well, maybe this was for the best. Maybe there's a higher reason that this flight was delayed, for example. Maybe this works out for the better. Say you got delayed in the airport and then you end up running into the love of your life. These are the different types of things that you can ponder with Mercury being retrograde in Sagittarius. So let's look at the Mercury retrograde in Sagittarius cycle. Now Mercury is actually going to be in the sign of Sagittarius from early November to early January, meaning that Mercury is in Sagittarius for the rest of the year. And Mercury is the planet associated with how we think, how we communicate, and how we listen. So your Sagittarius house in your birth chart may be up for review when it comes to how you communicate and the facts of the matter. Now, the facts of the matter are a little bit harder to come by with Mercury in Sagittarius. Mercury in Sagittarius tends to want to focus on the bigger picture. It wants to talk about the bigger issues, whether that be your viewpoint on politics, on religion, on spirituality, on foreign affairs. Mercury in Sagittarius is very direct, it's blunt, and it's honest. And because it's in retrograde, this can cause some communication issues or some tension. Of course, it's coinciding with the holiday period, Thanksgiving in the United States. So these different types of topics can be up for debate. They can be common to discuss around the dinner table. With Mercury retrograde in Sagittarius, I will say that it's more likely that we can miscommunicate. We can misinterpret what someone is saying. It's more likely that we can get into an argument and not be quite sure what we're arguing about or what we're debating, or debating for the sake of debating can come up with Mercury in Sagittarius as well. But it can also be a time with focusing on flying, focusing on travel, particularly if you're flying home for the holiday season. There can, of course, be delays. There can be flight cancellations, flight delays, being rerouted. You can get to the airport without your passport, perhaps, or you've forgotten an important documentation. Just be mindful to double check all arrangements when traveling and prepare for delays, whether that means bringing a book or making sure you have your phone charger at the airport. It can be important to consider these that little bit more. It can also be a time when your passport, you may suddenly realize it's up for review and you need to get it renewed for your trip. A visa matter might come up, or you need to renew it or something of that matter. Or you may need to change travel arrangements under this Mercury retrograde cycle. It's important to double check, as I say, and be prepared to be flexible when it comes to arrangements. So make sure that you're focusing as well on the details from time to time, and make sure that you know the facts of the matter rather than solely focusing on the bigger picture. And one of the reasons it may actually be easier to do that is because Mercury for this retrograde cycle is going to be in mutual reception with Jupiter in Gemini. So Jupiter likes being in Sagittarius, Mercury likes being in Gemini. Mercury doesn't like being in Sagittarius, Jupiter doesn't like being in Gemini, but when they are opposing each other, they have this mutual reception together, which can help them support each other from time to time. And they will be forming an opposition on the 4th, just the day before the GEMINI, which can help give us a little bit of a perspective shift and see things perhaps from somebody else's point of view. Even if you do have opposing beliefs, you may actually be finding under this retrograde, upon reflection, that you can see things a little bit differently, or you may open yourself up to new perspectives. Or with the opposition, you may not to. You may choose to keep an opposition between you and another person. But that's happening on the 4th. On the 5th is the GEMINI, and that's oftentimes a moment of clarity in a Mercury retrograde cycle, where we start to understand what it all means. We gain clarity on what we believe. We gain clarity on what we believe politically, religiously, spiritually, what we think the higher purpose of it all is. We might start to see the bigger picture with this particular GEMINI. It is essentially bringing clarity on what it is that you believe, and it can also bring clarity perhaps on a travel arrangement or some sort of legality in particular. Sagittarius is one of those signs that is associated with the law, alongside Libra. So under this retrograde cycle, we may actually see, particularly around the GEMINI from the 5th onwards in the Mercury retrograde cycle, that some decisions are potentially made when it comes to legal issues, or there's some clarity surrounding legal issues, whether that be in your own life or on the public stage. There may be some clarity coming surrounding legal issues, particularly with that Mercury-Jupiter opposition. As I say, they have a mutual reception. So seeing things from a different perspective might actually be a byproduct of this Mercury retrograde. One of the things that is not so pleasant about this Mercury retrograde is the Mercury-Saturn square. Now this is happening on the 6th of December. This is happening at 13 degrees of Sagittarius and at 13 degrees of Pisces. Mercury's at 13 of Sagittarius, Saturn is at 13 of Pisces. I have Mercury natally at 13 degrees of Sagittarius, so I've been experiencing this Saturn square all year. And it can be very tricky for conversation, very tricky for communication. It reminds me, when I speak sometimes under this square, I sometimes feel like Ralph Wiggum in The Simpsons when he says, "Me fail English? That's impossible." That is how I feel with Saturn squaring my Mercury in Sagittarius. And you may feel like that on that day. It may be harder to get your point across. It may be harder to communicate. It might not be as easy to find the words. You can feel a little bit like perhaps people are not listening to you. Around the time of this square, you could find that responses to your ideas are a little cold. With the Saturn square, you may find with this Mercury-Saturn square that communication, the 6th, is just not the best day. It's interesting that the cazimi is sandwiched in between the opposition and the square, activating that Jupiter-Saturn square that we had back in August, which is challenging us to see where we can expand and where we can grow and where we can find freedom of thought, in particular with Gemini or communication, Jupiter and Gemini, but also where we need to have spiritual boundaries and where we need to commit to some work within ourselves with Saturn in Pisces, where we need to be committing and where we need to restrict ourselves a little bit. Sometimes Saturn can be a restrictive energy for our greater good. You know, if we're taking too much sugar, for example, a Saturn transit can say, you're getting a warning from your dentist or a warning from your doctor, and you're thinking, okay, this is where I need to get serious about restricting this because it's not working for you. You know, Pisces is an energy of what is poisoning us, what is, you know, whether that be literally or metaphorically, what is making us ill, what is making us unwell, and knowing how to cut back or cut out whatever that is. So, you know, whether that is because the thing itself is very unhealthy for us or whether it is because of the dosage that we have in our lives. And that can be social media too, with Gemini energy being in the mix where we're ingesting too much information and we're overstimulated. It can be a byproduct of Jupiter in Gemini, and Saturn in Pisces is asking us to have better energetic boundaries. So the Mercury retrograde comes in and says when it comes to foreign affairs, when it comes to belief systems, this is where we have to bring a little bit of boundary setting in place for ourselves, or where we have to perhaps see things from a different viewpoint with Jupiter being in Gemini. This is quite a complicated, in some ways, Mercury retrograde, but it does offer a review that can assist us when it comes to how we think and how we view the bigger picture, and where we maybe are missing the details or we're not seeing things from a broader perspective. With Mercury retrograde in Sagittarius, it's important to be silly. It's important to see the funny side, watch your favorite comedy, make a joke of a situation, make sure that you're enjoying yourself. With Mercury retrograde in a fire sign and Mars retrograde coming up in a fire sign, it's important to reconnect with joy, with fun, with laughter, making sure that we do see the comical side of life, making sure that our thoughts with that square to Saturn do not get so heavy, even if it is humor that sometimes is a little bit melancholy with a Saturn square, dark humor, if you will. So it can be a Mercury retrograde where we reconnect with seeing the funny side, seeing the lighter side of situations. So as always, I'm going to pull a tarot card for this particular transit and see what this Mercury retrograde in Sagittarius wants to teach us. The timestamps are listed below. If you want to click ahead to your zodiac sign, feel free. As always, I suggest that you watch the ascendant first for the most accurate astrology predictions. Seven of Cups, lots of options, not quite sure what they are, not quite sure what to think. And the Six of Cups is underneath. So this one is quite self-explanatory. Within a Mercury retrograde cycle, we tend to hear from, or we tend to communicate with, or we tend to run into people from the past with the Six of Cups, people that we used to know. For a lot of folk with Mercury and Sagittarius, it may be people that you went to university or college with. There may also be conversations surrounding universities, surrounding colleges. This may be an area that is coming up more so on the news because of the retrograde cycle. Maybe there are some difficulties in some colleges around the world. But it can be running into people that you used to study with, or you travelled with, you went on holiday with at one point that you maybe lost touch with. These can be the type of people that you run into, but it does not have to be those people specifically, although it may center around education, people that you shared an educational experience with. Now, the Seven of Cups itself tends to bring a lot of different options. Some of them are real, some of them are positive, some of them are negative, and having to use your intuition to discern such. The trouble with this Mercury retrograde is that it has the square to Saturn in Pisces, and it's not necessarily clear what option is best, because with the Mercury-Jupiter opposition and the Mercury-Saturn square, sometimes we can range from being overly optimistic to overly pessimistic, and it can be quite up and down in deciding what is the best. I think with the Seven of Cups and Mercury retrograde, maybe being cautiously optimistic is the best that we can hope for with this particular transit. But if you do have a lot of options presented to you and you need to make a decision, use the Mercury retrograde period to pause, to reflect, and to consider all different possibilities and all different options with the Seven of Cups. This may be a retrograde where you get some clarity on the bigger picture of it all if you have been quite bogged down on the details and in a position of analysis paralysis. But I would say do wait until after the 5th of December to make any concrete decisions. That is what I have for this Mercury retrograde period. I hope you all have a good one, and I'll talk to you soon. Hi Aries, welcome to the Mercury retrograde horoscope for your sign. Aries, this is happening in your 9th house. So when it comes to communication issues or miscommunication in general, you might find that it comes up in your travel arrangements. When it comes to taking a long distance trip, it might be there are some communication issues when it comes to university, college, examinations, for example. You might be revising during this time. Retrogrades can be notoriously reflective. So you may be revising, you might be studying for an exam. You might find that exams or events at your university or college are cancelled or rearranged, or travel plans are rearranged or cancelled under this retrograde period. Hopefully not. Usually with Mercury retrogrades, it can be a case where things are delayed or rearranged rather than cancelled altogether. This could be a time where perhaps you are retaking a test or retaking a course, or you're thinking about going back to school. You're maybe thinking about going back to university or college, or picking up something that you were interested in studying before. Maybe you were studying a certain religion or philosophy, or you were very interested in politics. Maybe that fell off and now you're wanting to get back into it. You might pick up that book that you were meaning to read. You might visit somewhere that you used to frequent. You might return to a country that you've traveled to before, a city you've traveled to before. For some of you, that can obviously be going home, but for others of you, it can be returning to a place that you used to travel to. You may just also be finding at this time you're having to renew a passport, a visa, a license, or something of that nature that may be expiring or going out of date. Retrogrades can deal with renewals as well. And you might also be hearing news from people that you know that live abroad or live in different countries. Maybe they are returning to visit you at this time, or maybe they're returning home to where you are. You may run into people that you used to study with, or you went to university or college with, or you know through traveling. That's what I have for you, Aries, and I'll talk to you soon. Hi Taurus, welcome to the Mercury retrograde horoscope for your sign. Taurus, this retrograde is happening in your 8th house. So you may be perhaps either revisiting or reflecting something from a psychological level, or you may be reflecting or revisiting joint financial arrangements. So I'm going to cover both. This could be a time when you're returning to a therapist that you used to see, a psychologist that you used to see. This can be a time when you're reflecting on your emotional health, your emotional baggage, if you will, with the 8th house. Maybe you're wanting to open your mind and see things from a different perspective for the sake of healing or working through some traumas from the past. It could be, of course, with Mercury retrograde that you have a miscommunication or an issue with a therapist or someone that you are receiving counselling from. You might get dates wrong or times wrong, or you might interpret what they're saying the wrong way, or vice versa. Communication might not necessarily be so easy. But with the 8th house, sometimes it can also be a great time to investigate something from a different perspective, from a psychological sense. So they may put a new opinion or perspective to you that you feel a bit of resistance to, but then you might start to incorporate it into your thinking and sort of see things from a different perspective that might help you get to the root of a matter from a psychological perspective. It can also be with the 8th house, as I say, this is to do with joint finances. So you could be rethinking your joint financial relationships, Taurus. This could be that you are thinking of changing your tax situation or your mortgage or your partner's finances. You might be reflecting on these matters, rethinking them. It's a great time to get out the documents and see where you stand. Make sure that you have the details. Even if you have a big picture plan, it might be a good time to look over the old documentation or arrangements and revisit them and reflect on how well they're working for you. Can also be a time where perhaps with this retrograde that there can be miscommunication about filing taxes or the amount that you're owed or the amount that is owed to you. So make sure to double check the details, because there can be some miscommunication when it comes to, insurance or mortgages or things like that as well. Taurus, really good time to reflect and get out that paperwork to see what the deal actually is. It's not a great time to sign anything pertaining to documentation that is financial in nature, because Mercury retrograde tends to mean that we have to go back on it later. The details are not necessarily clear, so it's not the best time to get into any kind of binding contract if you can avoid it. If you can't avoid it, obviously it's better to make it as open as possible to change in the future. This might also be a time when you're maybe reconsidering and rethinking your own death and rebirth cycles. Maybe for some of you that is working on a will or a financial arrangement, and maybe for others of you, you're just reflecting on your legacy and what you'd like to be known for in this lifetime, what you would like to leave behind. Not to sound so morbid, but the 8th house is to do with that kind of change. So you might just be thinking, who am I, what do I want to leave behind, or what do I want to change in general about my life to make it more authentic to my soul. That is what I have for you, Taurus, and I'll talk to you soon. Hi Gemini, welcome to the Mercury retrograde in Sagittarius horoscope for your sign. So Gemini, this Mercury retrograde is affecting you quite significantly because Mercury is your chart ruler, and not only that, it is in an oppositional energy to Jupiter in your first house. So this oppositional energy that's happening with your first house, 7th house axis with the mutual reception can bring opportunity for miscommunication, misunderstandings, and a bit of conflict with a significant person in your life. Doesn't have to be a romantic relationship, but it certainly can be, in order to see things from a different perspective and maybe open up the communication a little better. Because this, mutual reception energy can help you see things from the perspective of another person. And this may be something that only comes from a misunderstanding or miscommunication issue. So there may be a little bit of back and forth with a partner or a romantic interest or a best friend, a significant person in your life. The 7th house is the house of the other. So there's usually, at least one person within this where you're having maybe a misunderstanding, a miscommunication, or you're reflecting on the relationship in general. You're maybe rethinking it or rethinking how you communicate with this person. There could be a bit of back and forth in what works for you in communication styles. And as I say, this can be through a misunderstanding or a miscommunication in the first place. It can, of course, also be a time where perhaps you and your partner are making plans and they have to be rearranged, or, date night needs to be changed at the last minute because something else comes up, or there's a delay in a plan with a partner. It can be a time when you're rethinking your relationship life and rethinking how it is going, or the plans that you're making with a partner in the future. It can also be a time for some of you, whether you're coupled or not, that you run into an ex from the past. It can be a time when you run into someone you used to date or be in a relationship with, or someone significant from your past. Just as equally, it can be that you just hear about someone from the past on social media, for example. You hear about an ex, you hear about an old love interest, you hear about a best friend of yours, an old best friend of yours, and you may also have the opportunity to reconnect with someone from your past. And I feel like for you, if you do, it might be something that is, you may have to see things from their perspective, or they may have to see things from your perspective differently if you are reconnecting with anybody from the past, whether it be any kind of relationship dynamic, albeit a significant one in your life, because this is the 7th house of committed partnerships and relationships. So someone that you were quite close to. Can be a business relationship as well. You might be reflecting on that. And if you're in some sort of legal arrangement, if there are legal proceedings taking place, they may be delayed, a bit back and forth. There can be miscommunication. And there may be a need to go over or hash out some issues or communications from the past as well in order to get clarity on the matter. Gemini, that is what I have for you, and I will talk to you soon. Hi Cancer, welcome to the Mercury retrograde in Sagittarius horoscope for your sign. So Cancer, this retrograde is happening in your 6th house, and this is to do with your daily domestic routine, your work, the role that you play, your health and your diet, your habits, basically what you do on a day-to-day basis. So this all may be up for reflection, Cancer. Now there can be miscommunication or communication issues at work. Things from the past may be brought up, work from the past may be brought up, things might have to be discussed, mistakes may be made. It can be a time when you send the wrong email to the wrong person, or vice versa. Someone sends the wrong email to you. You might just notice there's more errors in the workplace, or old work is being discussed or brought up for review. It can also be a time when you're reflecting and rethinking your health and well-being, what you do on a day-to-day basis, how you're healing, how you're working with your body, how you're taking care of yourself. You may be reflecting and rethinking these. If you have doctor's appointments or any appointments surrounding your health or your well-being, you may find that there's miscommunication. You might, be late for one, you might miss one, there might be an error in the date or the time, for example. It can be harder to communicate with your doctor or your physician. Miscommunication is more likely to occur there, so make sure that you're being really very clear, Cancer, and what it is that you want to say, and double checking and asking for confirmation and things like that, just to make sure that you've got the details amidst the bigger picture. Because as I say, everyone's going to want to focus on the bigger picture under this, but it can be easier to miss the details and what you need to do on a day-to-day basis to stay healthy, to stay well, and to take care of yourself. Cancer. This may be a time as well where something is coming up with a pet, because the 6th house is to do with pets. So if you have any pet appointments, you're going to the vet, for example, there can be delays or miscommunication there as well. So those are areas where you're going to want to be more thorough and double check. You may run into people that you used to work with. You may run into people that you used to be in the same gym as, that you maybe know from a health matter. You maybe know from, your doctor's surgery, or you might be going back for a review on something health related, Cancer. With this retrograde, there can be a bit of back and forth before a solution or an answer is found in these specific areas as well. But the mutual reception with Jupiter in Gemini is making me think, for a lot of you, this can be a time where you gain some knowledge that you need when it comes to healing, and maybe you are seeing a pattern between an emotional issue and a physical issue at the same time, Cancer. You might be getting some knowledge that combines your understanding of your emotional body and your physical body under this retrograde as well. That is what I have for you, Cancer, and I will talk to you soon. Hi Leo, welcome to the Mercury retrograde in Sagittarius for your sign. So Leo, this Mercury retrograde is happening in your 5th house. And so for a lot of you, with this being a retrograde, you may be reconnecting with past love interests, people that you used to date or people that you used to have a crush on. These are the more likely manifestations rather than a committed partnership, but it still can be. You can reconnect with people that you used to love or you used to be in love with. It can also be a time when you're rethinking what love looks like to you and what you need in romantic relationships, what you need from dating. There can be miscommunication with people that you are dating, though, so just bear that in mind. Particularly when it comes to conversations about the future or your wants or desires for the future, there can be a bit of miscommunication there. But it can be these type of conversations come up so that you can find common ground and see things from another person's perspective with that mutual reception with Jupiter. The same goes for your relationship to your children. There might be miscommunication there. You might be having to think more about your children, or you're thinking about their future, and perhaps there's some back and forth communication on what that looks like for them, and you may have to open up to their perspective and they may have to open up to yours as well. This can be a time as well where you're picking up an old creative project, something that you were working on previously that maybe you put down for whatever reason, or you didn't feel like it was quite working. You might have some creative inspiration when it comes to past projects or unfinished symphonies, so to speak. It's unlikely going to be a time when you start something or initiate something new that works well creatively. It's a better time to pick up what you attempted before, you started before, but it didn't quite get its chance with this particular Mercury retrograde, Leo. So if you were working on something creatively or artistically, or your heart was longing for a particular passion or creation in your life, this may be the time that you're picking it up again. and making it work this time round. And perhaps, yes, you're connecting with someone that you used to date. Maybe you didn't see eye to eye on particular issues at the time, but now you might open up to their perspectives and they might open up to yours, Leo. That is what I have for you, and I will talk to you soon. Hi Virgo, welcome to the Mercury retrograde in Sagittarius for your sign. So Virgo, this Mercury retrograde is happening in your 4th house of your physical abode, property matters, family. It's very hearth and home. So with this retrograde, I would not recommend getting any new contractors or hiring anybody new to do work on your home, because they can be notoriously unreliable, or there can be miscommunication surrounding the facts of the matter. This would be a better time to hire someone that you have already used before, or you're already in the midst of using, when it comes to renovations or redecorating or things of that matter, Virgo. It may be a time where you're having some communication issues with someone doing work on your home as well, or work on a property, or a property matter might stall, or there could be some delays or miscommunications and a bit of back and forth when it comes to renovations, redecorating, that type of thing with a property that you either live in or you're working on. This can also be a time where perhaps there's miscommunication when it comes to your family. You might be making plans to see your family and you might all get the wrong end of the stick when it comes to times or locations or dates. There can be communication issues and misunderstandings when it comes to home and family. And with Jupiter transiting your 10th house, there can be difficulty for you in balancing your private life and your public life, and how these are meshing together, and how you feel about these meshing together, if that's actually making you uncomfortable. You know, if you feel everyone at work knows too much about your private life, or you feel your family feels you're bringing work home, you might have to open your mind to the perspective of somebody else when it comes to your work and your family arrangements. Maybe you have to, open up to your boss with information you didn't quite want to share, but you feel you have to because of issues going on in the home. Or perhaps you're finding that your family is wanting more of your time and they don't want to hear about work as much, or something of that nature, with Jupiter and Mercury mutual reception. With the mutual reception, I will say this Mercury retrograde can actually end up being fundamentally quite productive and helping you see things from a different perspective you may not ordinarily have entertained. But as I say, this can be miscommunication with family, with moving, with renovating, with redecorating, those type of areas. There can be miscommunication and issues, delays, redoing, that sort of thing, Virgo. So just be mindful of that. Double check the details with all of these different types of matters. That is what I have for you, and I will talk to you soon. Hi Libra, welcome to your horoscope for the Mercury retrograde in Sagittarius transit. So Libra, for you, this is going to be happening in your 3rd house, and this is interesting because this is the house of communication, and Mercury retrograde is notoriously tricky for communication. So you might be finding, Libra, that when it comes to the way that you communicate, maybe you're reflecting on your communication style, how you speak, how you act, how you listen, how you've done these things previously and historically. You might be reflecting quite deeply on your own communication style. This could be something that you're reconsidering, how you speak up for yourself and how you listen to others and things of that nature. The 3rd house is the area of your chart that actually represents what is familiar. So for a lot of you, you might be, going back to a neighborhood or somewhere you used to frequent quite often. Maybe you used to have a local coffee shop and you're going back there. You're going back to what is familiar. For some of you, there could be communication issues when it comes to siblings, cousins, neighbors. You might have miscommunication with them. There can also be communication issues surrounding short trips and short travel arrangements. Your car could be having some issues during this retrograde. Unfortunately, the 3rd house is to do with cars. So you could have some car trouble, transport trouble, your local commute, trains could be cancelled or delayed, things of that nature. So just make sure that anywhere that you go when it comes to traveling, you're a bit more prepared. So maybe making sure that you've got water in the car, making sure you have a blanket in the car, or making sure that you have, earphones if you're traveling and you want to drown out the sound of the world, or something of that nature. If you're having to wait around a train station, it can bring up trouble or, delays or communication issues or inconveniences when it comes to getting from A to Z effectively, Libra. And communication just can be that little bit harder for you in general, because you can feel like you're maybe having to think more about what it is that you're saying. You think you've got the point, but you're not quite sure. With Jupiter transiting your 9th house and in mutual reception with Mercury during this retrograde period, it can be a time when you're rethinking and reflecting on your philosophy in general and sort of trying to find balance between your practical mindset, your logical mindset, and your more spiritual perspectives. And you may actually find yourself through a debate with someone else coming to a different perspective or a different conclusion altogether, and sort of opening yourself up to different mindsets from others with this particular Mercury retrograde. But I do think when it comes to, your locality, where you are, where you frequent often, there can be communication issues, as I say, with neighbours or siblings, or just in general when it comes to your everyday affairs. There can be miscommunication here and there, sending an email to the wrong person, a text to the wrong person. You could reunite with a sibling you've not seen in a long time, reunite with a neighbour that you used, run into a neighbour maybe from your past or something of that nature. But as I say, it's I think for you, Libra, honestly, it's more likely that you send the wrong email to the wrong person, or a text to someone that you didn't mean to send to, or you like something on Instagram that you wish you hadn't, or something of that nature with this particular Mercury retrograde for you, Libra. So as I say, just make sure you're checking all the details, making sure that your travel arrangements, you know what to do, and that you're not chancing your arm with a near empty tank for a road trip or something like that, making sure to be extra careful and cautious on the road when it comes to vehicles. That's what I have for you, Libra, and I'll talk to you soon. Hi Scorpio, welcome to the Mercury retrograde in Sagittarius horoscope for your sign. So Scorpio, this is happening in your 2nd house, and you may be reflecting or rethinking your financial situation. This may be a time when you're rethinking your relationship to money, whether that is how you make it or how you spend it. This could be a time when you're paying somebody back money that you owe, or it could be a time when someone's paying back money to you that is owed to you. You could be reflecting and rethinking on your personal finances in general, your relationship to money, your financial journey, how you're making it and how you're spending it, as I said before. This can be a time though when there's miscommunication when it comes to money. So be extra cautious with things like online banking, with your banking app, with your bills, double checking that when you're buying something that you know how much it costs. You might, for example, be charged double somewhere that you go. And if you don't notice that, that'll be the money gone. This can be a good time to check on what you're paying for on a subscription basis. A lot of people aren't aware, for example, that, if you have an Apple phone, you might be paying for things that you forgot to cancel. So you can go to the subscription part of your settings and cancel anything that you don't need anymore. Just doing a little bit of financial reflection on what your bills are and how much they cost and things like that. Now, the 2nd house is money, but it's also to do with our self-esteem and our value and how we, feel emotionally self-confident. So you might be reflecting on your personal confidence, your self-esteem, and sort of seeing it from a different perspective, particularly maybe when it comes to you for your finances. Maybe there's a connection between your spending and how good you're feeling about yourself at that particular moment. It's interesting because this Mercury retrograde, there is that mutual reception with Jupiter in Gemini. And Gemini is your 8th house of other people's money. You might be reassessing and reevaluating your financial connections to others as well. How other people help you out financially, or who you receive financial benefit from. And maybe opening up a dialogue with other people about joint financial arrangements and reflecting on those. This could be a time when you're really wanting to clear out some debt, or you're wanting to get a handle on your finances, and it may involve you having conversations with people who are quite knowledgeable about money, but there can be some difficulty getting the clarity there. You could find there's some miscommunication and a bit of back and forth with someone if you are seeking financial advice with the retrograde period, of course. So for a lot of you, you are rethinking your financial situation, but you may also just be rethinking, how you value yourself and your self-esteem and how that's going for you and where you're at on that journey, Scorpio. That is what I have for you, and I will talk to you soon. Hi Sagittarius, welcome to the Mercury retrograde in Sagittarius horoscope for your sign. Sagittarius, this is obviously happening in your sign. So not to sound too deep, but you're rethinking yourself. You're rethinking who you are, how you define yourself, what your relationship is to life, how you approach life. And you may be thinking, oh, well, I used to do this and that was actually working for me. You might be deciding that you're going to redo something when it comes to your personal goal, or pick up an old personal goal, or reconnect to yourself. Maybe you've not been taking care of yourself so well lately because you've had other commitments. You know, Saturn in your 4th house, you've had family commitments. Jupiter in the 7th, maybe you're planning a wedding or something like that. You might have had different commitments elsewhere, Sagittarius, and you're sort of bringing your energy back to you. You're kind of calling it back and saying, well, what do I need to do? What was I doing before that made me feel good? What was I doing before that made me feel like myself? And you're maybe picking that up again. Whether that is going for, a manicure, a pedicure, or whatever that may be, whether it was going to the gym, whether it was taking a solo trip every now and then, whatever the case may be, Sagittarius, you're probably picking up something to take care of yourself that you've gotten out of the habit of doing. And you're maybe rethinking your approach to life in general. Maybe you need a little bit more adventure, maybe you need a little bit more of a bit more mental stimulation or something, Sagittarius. Maybe you're feeling a bit bored and you're wanting to call the energy back to yourself and take care of you. You might find it harder to communicate at points though. With Mercury retrograde in your sign, you might feel like you're trying to say one thing and other people don't quite understand what it is that you're trying to say, because you're wanting to look at things from a broader perspective, but you're missing the point or you're missing the detail, and it can get lost in translation. There can be some communication issues, particularly with a partner or a key relationship in your life. But I do think when it comes to communication issues with a partnership or relationship, fundamentally the differences can help you see things from someone else's perspective and actually unite you somewhere in the middle. You know, if you're having communication issues with a partner, you might decide that you are perhaps being too close to what they're trying to say, or vice versa, and you're trying to open up that communication. And it might be a bit tricky at times, but I think fundamentally what it's going to be is understanding somebody else that little bit better at the end of it, though it might have some hiccups on the way there. I think with this Mercury retrograde being in your sign, you're feeling particularly reflective of what it is that you are doing. Maybe you had a personal project that you were working on and you have had to put it aside for whatever reason, and you're saying, do you know what, now is the time. I actually want to pick this up again. I want to work on it. I want to look at it through fresh eyes, Sagittarius. So this is a good time to bring some focus back to yourself. Maybe think about yourself a little bit more. Think about what you want. Think about what it is that you need. Maybe picking up something that you used to do. It's not a great time to make any new drastic changes to your appearance. It's not the best time to try out a brand new hair color. It's not the best time to try a piercing or a tattoo or something like that, because you may very quickly change your mind on anything you change physically, Sagittarius. That is what I have for you, and I will talk to you soon. Hi Capricorn, welcome to the Mercury retrograde in Sagittarius horoscope for your sign. So Capricorn, this Mercury retrograde is happening in the sector of your chart that is very much hidden. And so you might find things coming to mind that bother you, that you didn't realize still bothered you. You know, maybe past betrayals or past experiences that were quite emotional or hurtful for you come back to mind, and you realize that there's no closure, or that they were not resolved for you on a psychic or intuitive level. You know, maybe it's something that you're still holding on to emotionally, that this Mercury retrograde gives you a chance to process or potentially reframe, thanks to the mutual reception with Jupiter in your 6th house. Maybe you're going to see something that pained you from the past, or something that you had to do to heal, from a different perspective. Because Jupiter is in the 6th house in mutual reception with Mercury, you could be rethinking or going back and forth on a health or a work matter. Capricorn, you know, you might be seeing the clear connection between something emotional, psychological, and something physical. You know how physical symptoms oftentimes are manifestations of trapped or unprocessed emotions, and this Mercury retrograde may help you find what is actually still bothering you from within. You may actually also find that something lost, something that you thought was lost, is returned to you. For a lot of you, something that you thought was gone could turn up again, particularly if you find that maybe a pet buried it in the yard or something like that. You say you lost something and you thought you weren't going to get it again. It comes back to you. You find out your pet had buried it, or you find you left it at work, or you left it in the gym and it shows up in the lost and found or something of that nature. Something that you thought was lost might return to you. It's also entirely possible, Capricorn, that you may want to spend a little bit more time alone to gather your thoughts. It could be a time when you're wanting to take some more time in solitude to get clarity on what it is that you're, thinking, sort of try and get mental clarity. But as I say, also when it comes to anything on a spiritual, soulful, emotional level, you might be opening up conversations about the past or about, areas of your life where you haven't received closure. And you can actually find that through opening up tough conversations that maybe don't feel so easy or so good initially, you actually see things from a different perspective that helps give you closure or helps you heal. That is what I have for you, Capricorn, and I'll talk to you soon. Hi Aquarius, welcome to the Mercury retrograde in Sagittarius for your sign. So Aquarius, this is happening in your 11th house of friendships. So you may have miscommunication come up with a friend. There could be a misunderstanding. There could be a miscommunication. You might not necessarily understand what the other person is saying. You might not see things through their perspective. And you may have to have some conversations about your differences. And this may actually be something that helps open you up to seeing things from a different perspective, thanks to that mutual reception with Jupiter in the 5th. It could be a case where maybe you get into an argument simply because you're out on a night out and there's been drink taken. Or it could be a case that you're maybe, having a disagreement about what you consider to be fun or creative. Maybe you're working on something creative with a group of people. There can be miscommunication when it comes to a group or a friendship. It can also be a time where you are perhaps reconnecting with your friends. Maybe you're going to see friends you haven't seen in a long time. Maybe you're reconnecting with a team, with a group of people, with an organization, with a club. And you're reconnecting with all these different people that maybe for whatever reason you haven't seen in a while. Maybe there have been reasons that you've not been able to see them or work with them or, go to events with them, and now you're getting to reconnect during this retrograde period. It could be a case as well where you just simply find in social interactions there is more opportunity for miscommunication, particularly when it comes to children, your children or other people's children. If you're at social events, there can be awkward conversations or miscommunication with your kids. Maybe they say something that embarrasses you, or your kids and your friends' kids aren't getting along and there's a need to play mediator or something of that nature with this particular transit, Aquarius. You may also be rethinking the future. You're rethinking, what does it look like? What is my life going to be if I do this? What is life going to be like when this happens? You're sort of reconsidering it and reflecting on how, you're going to make it the best that it can be. What's the bigger picture of it all, but also kind of getting to grips with that vision while not forgetting the details. Jupiter and Gemini in the 5th. What the detail is sort of what would make you happy. Aquarius, Jupiter in the 5th is wanting you to embrace happiness, to find joy, to find love, to feel abundant, to feel lucky. So just, when you're envisioning the future, maybe you're shifting your perspective actually at this point to be a little bit more optimistic. There is a square to Saturn coming in with this Mercury retrograde. It's coming in from your 2nd. So maybe you're feeling a little bit pessimistic when it comes to your self-esteem, your self-confidence, or your finances. But overall, there is a lot of opportunity here for you to visualize a better future for yourself, and maybe things will start to look a little bit brighter by the end of it, Aquarius. That is what I have for you, and I'll talk to you soon. Hi Pisces, welcome to the Mercury retrograde in Sagittarius horoscope for your sign. So Pisces, this is happening in your 10th house of career. You might be rethinking your job. You might be rethinking your career. How much is it working for you? What's working for you? What's not working for you? How you feel about your job? How you feel about your work-home life balance in particular? And you might just be rethinking in general what you feel your purpose is, or how you're defined, or your career. You might be rethinking it in general. You may also be, picking up something that you were working on work-wise from the past, or going over old work, reviewing it, revising it. Maybe something has to be reviewed within your workplace that you worked on before, or maybe you're picking up a project that didn't quite get off the ground. There can be room for miscommunication in the workplace, whether that is sending an email to people you didn't mean to send it to, or CCing in the wrong person, or hitting reply all, the dreaded reply all. It could be a case as well where you're having communication issues with a manager or someone in a position of authority. Maybe they are off on leave, or maybe more people are out of the office. Or maybe you're rethinking your relationship to authority or being in a position of authority yourself, Pisces. With Saturn being in your sign and square to this Mercury retrograde, you may be feeling as though you're having to put in an awful lot of hard work and you're not necessarily sure if you're being rewarded for it or not, and it's leading you to rethink your job. Or maybe you're just finding that a lot of the pressure is building up in your career, Pisces, and it is disrupting your work and home balance. You might find that when it comes to finding work and home balance, your public and your private life with this mutual reception, there can be misunderstandings and miscommunication when it comes to your work and career. And you may find that because of it, you end up getting, or there could be, errors or back and forth. You might end up becoming quite close to somebody in the workplace through these mishaps and these mistakes. It can also be that you run into people that you used to work with, you hear from people that you used to work with. Maybe you run into someone that used to be a boss or in a position of authority. There could be some miscommunication with a parent, or perhaps whatever is happening within your home, expansion and happiness within your home, you're having to balance that with your job and doing a lot of work. And you're maybe feeling pulled, Pisces, in multiple different directions under this retrograde period. But it is, from a wider perspective, leading you to rethink and reconfigure how you work, where you work, what you do, and how you show up to the world, and how you want to be defined. You might be rethinking how you communicate at work and how you present yourself generally. That is what I have for you, Pisces, and I'll talk to you soon.